two, one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and I know we're starting a little bit late, but I would think that our gentleman of the hour that we are going to be talking about, Mr. What Mo? This was your birthday pick, or at least one of them, right?
It was.
So why don't you tell us about this eligible bachelor that we're going to be talking about?
He's quite eligible.
Yeah, for necrophiliacs.
Today we're going to be talking about the Ballad of Cable Hogue. This is a Sam Peckinpah movie. It was written by John Crawford and Edmund Penny. It was produced and directed by Sam Peckinpah. It stars Jason Robards, Stella Stevens, and David Warner, among others. It's got music by Jerry Goldsmith and Richard Gillis. It's distributed by Warner Brothers and released on March 18th of 1970. It's just there's a bit to it, you know. It's a solid tale about a man rising from nothing and building himself a meager little empire out in the desert, all based around, you know, water. One of the few things in the world we can't live without. So this is definitely not my first time watching this movie. I have a bit of a history with it. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. But before we get into that, you know, I guess we'll start with you there, Dave. Is this your first time watching Cable Hogue?
Actually, no. But I thought that I had actually seen the entire thing, but it turns out that I actually had seen like 3/4 of the film at one point in time, because I had actually picked this film up several years back, and I'm because of my father being very much a lover of westerns and whatnot. I guess I kind of got into the whole western atmosphere. He was into war movies, westerns, and historical shit and all that jazz. It kind of is kind of up my alley, but it's not your typical western. So
Nope.
it's kind of a period piece. It's kind of moody, and I liked it. I mean, it was a little bit comical, but it was more of a melodic comical. You know, it was. I mean, it's set at the edge of the time when like the Western frontier was going out the door, and then you know, civilization was coming on through. I mean. Basically, you see this whole time span of this, you know, man who seems to be kind of a bum in the beginning, but you know, tragedy happens and he ends up tripping over a goddamn waterhole. So to me, it was actually kind of cool, you know, to see the whole thing through. And I enjoy it. So my first time seeing it, I kind of laughed at the moment when what's her name, Hildy, ended up throwing that pot at
the chamber pot. Yeah, that's such a good sequence.
And I'm sorry, but I can never ever forget when the dollar bill actually smiles at him.
Oh god, yeah. We'll definitely be touching on that.
Yeah.
What about you there, Jake?
You gotta love those special effects there.
Oh, they were quality. What about you, Jake? Is this your first time watching Cable Hogue?
It was, and actually, to be honest, and I guess maybe I'm a bad movie fan for saying this, I don't think I'd ever heard of the movie before you suggested it. It's a very interesting movie. I would disagree, Dave. I think this is full-on comedy in the vein of that time period. I mean, this is the same year that they adapted MASH into a movie. It's the same year they attempted to adapt Catch-22. And also the same year, I think 1969 was the year they did Support Your Local Sheriff, and this was the year I think the sequel came out, Support Your Local Gunfighter. All of those kind of danced around the same basic feel that this one has, the two westerns being more solidly of like a lighthearted western, and the other two just being like that pitch black comedy. Like, I mean, I've said before, Suicide is Painless, the MASH theme, is one of my all-time favorite original songs, partly because it's got this gorgeous melody and it's so hard, but upbeat at the same time. And the theme songs for this were pretty awesome too. I was humming them halfway through the movie. I was like, every time they came on, I was like, "Oh, that song again."
Yeah, it's an earworm, dude, and it's such a good effect. Especially like the part where the preacher is singing it when he comes up on him in the grave.
Oh, and the preacher. Okay, so that brings up one thing about my first impression with this movie. I really enjoyed it overall. I enjoyed the darkness. I enjoyed the creativity. It was a very creative story. I enjoyed the humor. I enjoyed most of the performances were great. They were really well performed. But there were certain aspects that would not play well in today's climate. And there were certain aspects that I had trouble with. And one of them was the scene. We'll get to it, I know, but the preacher did.
Oh, I already know.
The preacher did one scene that really bugged me.
Joshua is fucked. And Cable is even looking at him sideways sort of halfway through the movie. Like, I like you, dude, but damn, you know.
Yeah, and I didn't even recognize David Warner. I mean, I recognized him, but I didn't. But one is he's so much younger here. But when I looked at his filmography, I'm like, holy crap! That's Ra's al Ghul. And he is the guy that played Ra's al Ghul in the Batman animated series. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, he's great. I always love him.
He's had some good roles too. And most of these guys have had good roles. One of Jason Robards' last credited movie role was in Magnolia, which is an all-time favorite of mine. So he died not long after that movie came out. So overall, I really enjoyed different aspects of the cast. I enjoyed different aspects of the music. It's well done. It's a good movie. I'm glad you picked it. But there were moments that I was kind of like...
Old Joshua, he's marches to the beat of his own drum. He did say that it was a faith of his own revelation or whatever.
Well, actually, and I just got to interject. I've just got to say, and Brandon will know a little bit about what I'm talking about here. Not necessarily what he practiced in his religion, but the way he went about it. I know a certain individual that it reminded me a lot of that individual. Yes. I know someone who it reminded me painfully of a certain individual.
What about you there, Brandon? Is this your first time with Cable Hogue?
Try to keep it muted as I can throughout because my wife likes to watch certain events like at a major sporting event. So
I should have known
apologize, y'all hearing that in the background. But any case, this was my first time. I was actually.
I can't believe you never saw it.
I was first actually checking this out with the director of it because I was like, that sounds familiar. And then I realized, wait, he wrote and directed Straw Dogs. And I was like, wow, that's so that intrigued me further. So I had to finally get a copy for myself, which was good. It worked out well. I was able to provide help for the other group.
Yeah, I'll have to get a copy.
But I was amused by it. It definitely had the grittier nature that I like in most cowboy films. I was over what's the word? Overexposed to cowboy movies as a child. To the point where many of them, I don't know, I felt like constantly being with rawhide and gun smoke and have gun will travel. it got boring to me. So when I finally got to see some of the grittier ones, that actually perked my interest up. And this one kind of hit along the line in the middle for me. It wasn't quite as straight-laced.
It
as
wasn't quite as
yeah.
gritty as like Django. Might have been.
Like I say, it's not as straight-laced as something like the old school John Wayne movies, like some of his early ones, but it's not as but it wasn't as gritty as say a Clint Eastwood Western. Except for Paint My Wagon.
Well, actually, one of Eastwood's early ones, Hang 'em High, had a little bit more of a.
But even that was gritty.
Yeah, but it wasn't as dark as some of the later ones. But I know what you mean. Yeah. But it wasn't quite as ribald as Blazing Saddles, though. It was.
Oh God, no! That was a comedy of a different nature, but yes. I did enjoy it, and I was able to watch it and keep my interest the whole way through. So I definitely I would take my hat off to it, but I'd take my headphones too. So.
Well, I'm glad that you guys all enjoyed it. It's definitely one I think people should see. I kind of don't even think of it as a Western almost. You know, I would agree with Dave wholeheartely on it that it's more of a period piece that just I mean, it could really take place in any time period. It could take place on a different friggin' planet. The story is just essentially
Cable Hogue on Mars.
The reason why I say melodic is it was not without its humor. It's just most humor, because I've seen much of the humor that's out there, falls flat on me these days. And I liked the humor in here. I mean, it was dry.
Dry. It's got some slapstick stuff, and then it's got some straight up dry sort of clever humor.
From being luridly comical to all, at the very end, you get a dramatic, sad ending. To me, it's
in a way.
Well, yeah, in a way, but yeah. I don't know. To me, it was like a roller coaster of moods. So,
yeah, it's got a really chill vibe through all of it too. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just me, but Cable Hogue, it's a classic sort of like homesick in bed, watch something to make you feel a little bit better type movie. It's comfort food for me.
It's a cross-sected movie.
I definitely had not seen this until I saw it. I basically had seen like Straw Dogs and The Wild Bunch, and I love both those movies, so I figured it's about time that I check out some other Peckinpah movies. And I actually got this and Cross of Iron, I believe it's called, back when you still got like Netflix in the mail. So I sent off for those bad boys, waited patiently for them to arrive. And Cross of Iron's okay, but this one I fell in love with. It's definitely my favorite Peckinpah movie if I had to choose. And it's one of my favorite movies of all time just because it kind of hits a lot of marks for me that, make for an enjoyable movie. I'm always a fan of like a good revenge story. I'm always a fan of tales of underdogs making something great out of nothing, finding shit where it's not supposed to be kind of thing. And making the best of it, and this movie is that to a T. So I guess we could run through characters real quick. It's not one of those movies that has a huge cast. I mean, there's basically your three main characters and then some supporting characters, which I imagine will hit as their scenes come up. But obviously our first character is the titular character himself, Cable Hogue. What do you guys think of him? I guess we'll start with you again there, Dave.
Well, Cable Hogue, he's kind of a mixture of characters. He reminds me of the kind of person who seems like if he were the kind of person to be out west, he's like down on his luck and doesn't really know where the fuck to go and what to do. And of course, in the very beginning of this film, we see him get relieved of his mule and his belongings by some shady characters, and he's left with nothing. So he's stuck out in the desert, and he literally accidentally falls upon this water hole, and he's ecstatic about it. I mean, but then, of course, the preacher comes along and tells him, "Well, I don't know how much you can call it yourself, or how much of a stake of a claim you have in this fucker." So to me, Cable Hogue, he's the hopeful prospector to try to lay something and not be just a nobody.
Yeah.
So
stubbornly optimistic.
Correct. And I like his character. He's not exactly politically correct, but he has enough brains on his shoulders to realize that he's got something there, and he goes through a lot of mockery to even get some kind of stand and saying, "Hey, I've really got something here that could be useful to both of you towns that I'm in the middle of." So
yeah, he's a good example of a character that might not be book smart, but he's intelligent at the same time, I think. I don't know. What about you, Brandon? You enjoy Cable?
Oh yeah, he's an amusing character. I like how he deals with things. It's kind of weird. If I was to combine Cable and the preacher, that could remind me of the main teenage character in Lady Hawk.
Okay.
In a way. But I find him as sort of like he's an old man that he almost reminds me a little bit of the man with the plan. He reminds me of Fred Tuttle when Fred Tuttle was younger and full of piss and vinegar and ready to learn how to shoot some people, capture some rattlesnakes, and make himself a private.
And eventually learn how to do dishes because
Hey, I love his way of doing dishes. Just nail the fuckers down.
That was great.
It makes them easier to wash.
And how to wash them? You just throw a bucket of water on them and then lift them.
Well, he did tip them up to drain.
Yeah, the sun makes them real pure, he says.
True.
What about you, Jake? Do you take a liking to Cable?
Cable is a likable guy. I mean, and again, a lot of this has to do with the cast. Jason Robards is a fine actor, and he had sort of like a wry, sort of like there was a little bit of Clint Eastwood, this sort of the unflappability and that sort of thing. But he also reminded me a little bit of Roy Scheider in Jaws, like a little bit of that Brody character, a little bit, And I don't know. It's but on the other side, he was all his own character in some ways. And the connection I got with Lady Hawk was not the one that Brandon mentioned. It's that in this film, Cable is basically a hobo. He's basically a bum. So in this one, you literally have a hobo with a shotgun, and then Lady Hawk starred the guy who would go on to star in Hobo with a Shotgun. So, but I like Cable for the most part. He does. He knows what he wants, and but he's quick. He is willing to listen to other people. Like he didn't even think about staking a claim until the preacher brought it up, and then he was like, "Oh yeah." And then he basically just I didn't entirely like how aggressively he tried to force his way into it, but the way he ended up winning over the banker, I like that. The banker was a fun character too, a little side character, but he was fun. But he just basically ended up just being won over by Cable's personality, basically. As were most of the characters. Most of them just liked his personality, and he ended up, he became boon companions with Slim Pickens, and that was his brother, right? That was the other guy, the shotgun guy, the coach. I think it's like the only credit for Easy Pickens, from what I understand. But Slim Pickens was always a fun element of that time period.
Oh, and they're good in this, man. They're like memorable characters for sure, as far as the side characters go.
But yeah, I like Cable. I thought he was kind of a fun character, and he did well for himself.
Yeah, he's got some good character development in the movie too. They don't come right out and spell it out to you, but he gets a little less naive towards the end, a little more clever. Like he kind of starts out the movie probably a better person, and he ends the movie a better person than most of these people out there. You know, like he's hesitant to kill people. You know, he doesn't take any real great pleasure in it. You know,
Right.
And
although it is interesting that IMDb points out the body count is 3, and every one of them is centered on him in some way.
yeah, because he blows
Yeah.
that dude away at the beginning too.
Right.
And you know, he tried to take the better, you know, more moral way out, I suppose, with his revenge later. We'll get to that.
Right.
You know, he's not a ruthless man. He's a grizzled, sort of rough around the edges character that is good at heart, you know, at the end of the day.
Mhm.
Right. So I suppose that brings us to the preacher, which I guess outside of what the hell was her name again? Hildy. You know, the preacher Joshua is kind of our second main character, really, in that
The
he's
Reverend Joshua Douglas Sloan.
Yeah, he's a slimy lizard of a man, but again, kind of like good at heart underneath all of it. I think he genuinely takes a liking to Cable and sticks by him for, you know, the duration of the movie until it gets to a point where he just can't be around anymore. You know.
He's a pervert that the likes of an anime pervert.
Actually, I liked when he is like, "Would you like to see? I have pictures of my parishioners."
I mean,
and then he's like, "That one's naked as a jaybird. We are come into this earth naked, and naked we leave." And then, he was convincing.
He's opportunistic as all hell too. If he can get in a grope somewhere, he's gonna go for it. One of my favorite moments with Joshua is when they're like, you know, fighting it out at the end, or he's out there arguing with that dude that's like after him, and Joshua just grabs Hildy's tits and he's like, I think he's like says something like, "Take comfort in the Lord, my child. The violence may spill inside," or whatever. And he's just
slapping on him.
His intro's pretty great. You know, he stumbles upon Cable while he's digging like extra graves,
and he literally shoots his hat straight off, thinking that he's another person trying to get at his water hole.
Right.
Oh yeah. I love too that part where he tries to like weasel his way into getting the free water, and he's like, 10 cents a head, you pious son of a bitch, or just tells him, I don't give a shit what God you
10 cents.
He pulls out that little coin purse. And I don't know, man. I mean, he seemed like a good sort of you know, Cable is one of those guys that's stubbornly driven to his goal or whatever, and maybe tries to not acknowledge other things that might complicate it. And Joshua seemed like a good foil to that. You know, he kind of would point stuff out to Cable at various points in the movie that obviously Cable was thinking about, but not facing, you know, full on like he should. Like, mainly his love for Hildy and all.
The eyes of a woman and how shapely the woman's breasts are.
Yeah, that was interesting. His ruminations on that subject, and I did like again.
How would you like them? Would you think that God would put them on a woman's back or something like that?
Yeah, and he's like, "There's a thought," you know. Kind of fun.
But and I like how that actor David Warner, his most recent credited role is Admiral Boom, the crotchety next door, not crotchety, but eccentric, let's put it that way. Eccentric next door neighbor in Mary Poppins Returns. You know, that's kind of.
I still need to see.
It was a fun movie. He plays this old coot who sets off a cannon from his roof every day at certain times.
Actually, there is a character that the preacher reminds me of. The one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can share my screen here. Chrome tab.
And of course, he also was the theater professor in Scream 2, which was nice. He played a character named Spicer Lovejoy in Titanic. I don't remember the character, but that seems appropriate.
Never mind. Oh, there it is. There you go. Right there. Now you tell me. It should be showing him right there. Doesn't that remind you?
Yes.
That's exactly what he's doing too.
Yeah.
Yes, he could be Miroku. Yes. No, I think he was a smoother talker than Miroku, though.
Oh yeah, he didn't go walk up and say, "Will you have my children?" That would have been a great start for it, though.
And I'm not sure Hildy was quite as badass as Sango, but as or what was that? Yes. And this guy also was in Turtles 2: The Secret of the Ooze. He was the professor. Yeah.
Indeed.
And
he's always
Bandits. He's got some good credits.
I like the idea of him just being this wandering reverend dude who's really just using this whole religion thing as a way to, like, bed some females. And he's probably not a legit preacher, but then some of the stuff that he says, like about when someone's on hard times, God will send like a messenger into their life or whatever, stuff like that. And it does feel like he is that for Cable.
And I'm sure he believes most of what he says, even if it is self-serving. But that one part that you just mentioned, though, the part that bugged me the most probably in the whole movie was when he saw that girl who got the telegram and she's crying, and he literally follows her home, goes right on in, and starts, feeling her up until there's a knock on the. He's coming this close to basically raping her, but she's willing enough that it could have been worse. But then you find out her husband is. He's like, wait a minute, who were we talking about? Oh, my brother.
Yeah, because she's like crying because she got this telegram about her brother's death, and he assumes.
And of course, her husband is gunning for him after. Oh, well, I will give him props for how he escaped at that moment. That was pretty good. But
he has him bound down there, and he's buttoning back up her corset or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty slimy. I do like how he's got that reversible collar, though. So, like, it's like his preacher collar, but he can turn it around, and it's like a regular collar.
Right.
I think he says some shit, too, about his, like, if I can't raise heaven, then I intend to raise hell. And he just turns it around and goes into the whorehouse with him. That's classic.
But then he, like, slinks out because he was so disappointed. You kind of get the feeling that he thought it was going to be a three-way.
And that's the thing I will say with this is culturally, I'll admit, if I didn't watch anime, I'd say it was entirely unlikely to see a character like this in these days. But I can refine that as you probably won't ever see a character like this in American cinema anymore these days, because it would be too inappropriate to have such a character. But in anime, you still see those types of tropes all the time, the pervert trope.
Yeah, sometimes homeboy's a little lecherous. I mean, it's I don't gotta condone it to laugh at it.
I mean, even in Robin Hood, often Friar Tuck is often like off the beaten path in the areas of being a priest. So, but I mean, you kind of have to take the good with the bad, at least as far as he goes.
Yeah, I think he's got some redeeming qualities as a character. I think that if they'd played off the scene with that girl a little more like they did some of the other stuff in the movie, you're not quite sure how to take it at that point yet, too, because the humor of the whole movie hasn't quite set in. Right. So it's like, I thought this was going to be funnier than it is, but then it's as you see other stuff later, it's like, okay, that bit was funny.
I definitely saw some humor from the get-go, but I was kind of taken aback at first with the. I made that comment on the message thread dealing back to bad CGI sharks because they had the thing where the professor was like, "And now I will show you a gratuitous scene of titties," and they do. And then when they introduce Hildy, that's exactly what you get. Several close-ups.
No doubt. There's no doubt where his interest was.
It is a Western without some skin involved.
Well, right. And it's just Cable hadn't obviously seen a woman in a while. And I thought he was very respectful with his dealings with Hildy, even though he did like skip a bill on her at first. I don't know what she was charging for baths, but he definitely owed her money.
Yeah. I'll admit that would have been worth at least a little bit.
She washed a pound of dirt off him.
Well, I kind of liked how she was so, come hither to him. As soon as he walked through the door, she's got that.
Well, and her whole freak out was kind of, that's sort of anime-ish too, in a way. Putting her foot through the door and chucking stuff at him all comically, and then they end up crashing that tent revival with the chamber pot.
I love that.
I mean, she was gonna rub his feet and all that, but there's a reason for it. I mean, he was actually praying to God for a miracle, and that was around the time that he finally found the water, and so then there was a prayer service going on, so he was kind of reminded of that, which.
He was reminded of the preacher that was chilling his boots at his camp, and he's like, oh my God, he probably went to the other town and filed a claim while I was at this town. And that's why he left when he did. And then, of course, the preacher's just hanging out at camp, having a good old time.
Hanging in the grave.
That's so great.
Drink up, preacher.
It's so great when he's thinking about it because she's over there on the bed and he's like, I gotta go, but this is a good opportunity, and then he just looks down and he's like, nope, lost it. I gotta get out of here. Sorry.
We did we mention where that aforementioned bill change came into play?
Well,
like
this is a good segue into
loan from the bank. He gets his loan from the bank, and he goes out, and first thing he does is sees her. And he looks at the money. And he looks at the money, and that smile goes.
Classic.
And it's like you get the impression that the banker probably would have been PO to him, but he was so cracking up over the revival getting trashed.
That's that whole thing too. There's a running thing in the movie with characters, or just sort of a theme where there's like, you can have a relationship with God, but maybe be distrustful of the people that claim to represent them. There's I think 3 different points in the movie where something like that's kind of explicitly hinted at, and that preacher.
The first hint is right when Cable stumbles in. He found the water hole. And he's revived. He was on death's door, and he found the water hole. And he's revived, and he stumbles not very far at all, and he finds tracks. And he realizes, wait a minute, this is a stagecoach road. And not long after that, the Pickens brothers roll up with a stagecoach. And at first, the woman inside is stuffy as hell from the get-go. But then the gentleman is pretty warm and friendly at first. But then when he sees that Cable and Slim Pickens are like bosom buddies after just a couple of drinks, then he's like, oh, another inveterate sinner. And then all of a sudden, the two of them just clam up and they're ready to go. And it's like, okay, yes, clearly you are here to spread the gospel and to truly treat your brethren like, no, they're just your typical judgmental, So that was like, I think, probably the first commentary on that. And
and it shows totally like the crustier dudes being more hospitable,
Right.
I mean, my favorite line in the film is when he's sitting there saying, where he's talking to the banker and saying, it's like, well, I've got a preacher. Would you trust it if he vouched for it? It's like, I'd trust it even less if you brought him.
He's like, would you doubt a man of the cloth? And he's like, that's the first person I'd doubt.
And then Cable just gets a smile.
Well, then I guess I came to the right place.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, this is a good segue into Hildy. We've touched on her a little bit, but she's the town. I don't know what you would call that. She's a prostitute. I mean, she's like the madam. There is no madam running the prostitution. She's it, because it's like this small little, one horse town in the middle of the desert.
She is a very popular girl.
There are some other ladies that are apparently in the bar, but she's apparently the bedroom slut. So
yeah, there's barmaids, it seems like, but she's definitely like the operating prostitute or whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna say she is not. Slut's kind of a dismissive way of putting it. She is the head madam.
Yeah, she seems pretty good at her trade. I mean, she gave him a bath, dude. Like, that's not very common in these movies, I feel like, with brothels. They're not always well bathed, and Cable came out of there pretty well groomed. But she pretty much very quickly. Well, her whole introduction is giving Cable directions, and that's where we get introduced to like his illiteracy. That and when he's trying to sign the deed and he doesn't even know how to spell his name. That's so classic, where the guy's like, well, how do you spell Cable? And he's like, well, if you're getting hung up on Cable, you're really gonna, screwed when you get to Hogue.
Well, and of course he says a couple times, waddle, water, W-A-T-L-E.
I don't know how you get there, but they get the idea. But she I don't think he realizes at first that she's a prostitute. She's obviously a well-endowed woman, and he's appreciative of that. I like that she stuck around and actually, didn't just take off for San Francisco right away, because clearly they spark up this chemistry. You can see it in that whole scene where she's giving him the bath and stuff. She kind of likes him a little bit, and I think that's because of their initial interaction there together.
And even though she's a younger woman than he is, because of how much experience she's had doing what she's been doing, I think she's a little bit more world weary that way too. So in a sense, they're in the same frame of mind. They are probably just as old as each other's minds as when they're together. So
right, yeah, they're a good match. And I mean, Cable's immediate instinct is to try to cut her in on this sweet action that he's got with the water hole. Try to take her out of that life. And she's got designs on obviously marrying a rich dude who will have a stroke in bed and becoming, the ladiest lady in town eventually in San Francisco. But
as she says, I'll be the ladiest Sam lady you ever saw. Yeah. And actually, I'm looking at the quotes here, and I just want to go back just a minute to talk about we didn't really talk about all that much about Cable's prayers as he was stumbling through the desert. I love the first one. It's real simple. It's ain't had no water since yesterday, Lord. Getting a little thirsty. Just thought I'd mention it. Amen. And then, then he keeps doing like that. And then like
he's expecting a reaction. He looks up like he's expecting a reaction from the Lord.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, it reminds me of the opening of Lady Hawk almost.
Well, it reminds me. I was going to say it reminds me of the opening of Maverick, the part where he's like, "Lord, whatever I've done to piss you off, if you could just let me know what it was, I promise to rectify the situation." And actually, his prayer the second day in particular, now about sinning, you just send me a drop or two, and I won't do it no more. Whatever in the hell it was I did. I mean that, Lord. And it's like, so I'm wondering if William Goldman was familiar with this movie and if that was a sly nod to the movie in Maverick. But I don't know, but maybe. But I just thought that was kind of fun. And I also found the quote that we were talking about for Sloan. Funny thing, it doesn't matter how much. No, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Did it ever occur to you, Cable, how wise and bountiful God was to put breasts on a woman, just the right number in just the right place? Did you ever notice that, Cable? Well, where in the hell would he put them? On their backside? It's a thought.
I'm with him on that. It would be fun. Just all in the same spot. But yeah, I mean, I thought that was an interesting parallel with Lady Hawk, how both the movies kind of start with like,
Right.
our crustier character having these conversations with God, trying to get out of a pickle.
Right.
I don't know. I think that to the whole dynamic between Cable and Hildy is pretty cool, in that they're both like, doggedly driven by their own ambitions, and maybe that puts their relationship in kind of a shitty position, because she's eventually going to get out of there, and Cable's staying because he built all this from nothing and he wants his revenge. So I guess that's, general plot of the movie should probably be nailed down now. It's, Cable, as we've covered, is wandering through the desert after being stranded with no water, and he stumbles upon this water hole, digs it out, kind of comes on the realization that, hey, this is pretty close to the road through here. I could make something out of this. Joshua kind of tries to imply that maybe he might just go sell the information for the claim. So Cable comes into town. He gets his claim, only buys 2 acres, which the dude at the claims office thinks is pretty ridiculous, but it turns out that's all he needs,
Yeah. He's like, I got those 2 acres. That's where water is.
Yeah, that's all you need. I mean, one acre probably would have done fine.
Right.
And then, he tries to hit up the rail service, or not the rail service, the stagecoach service, to cut them in on the action. And they kind of laugh him out of there. That's when he goes to the bank. And just through sheer determination and seeming like a genuine dude, basically gets the banker to give him a loan to get this off the ground here. And then he does some other crafty things, like trading a week worth of water rights for material to build his house out there, and kind of upgrade his facilities and all that. And he builds a waste, or whatever you would call that, like a halfway point, a station, watering hole out in the middle of the desert, and builds himself pretty steadily a little desert empire. He's probably the richest dude in the area by the end of the movie, and next outside of maybe the bankers and the stagecoach people.
And it's probably worth noting that he had probably one of the best little moments, not just comedic moments, but like moments of like hardcore acting in the whole film, was when he was talking to the banker, and he was asking for a $35 steak, I think it was. And the banker's like, well, what do you have for collateral? He's like, collateral? And he's like, what do you have to put up against it? I got the land. You got $2.50. What else you got? He's like, I got me. Ain't I worth anything? And that's just moment. The way he said that was just, it was a great little moment. But it was, it was probably one of the more earnest lines, I think, in the whole film. One of the more sincere lines in the whole film.
And he starts to walk
it
out
definitely helped. Huh?
Well, and he starts to walk out all decrepit, like all sad.
Right.
And he's like,
he's got the puppy dog eyes.
I want to hear more.
I'd have given him $100 right there, just because I was breaking my goddamn heart.
Yeah. But the banker, though, he does show like a little bit. It was more probably because he was amused by him and impressed by his. I guess he figured anyone that would barge in there the way he did would be able to do something.
Well, right, and he's got that infectious determination,
right.
Where it'd be hard not to want to be friends with the dude. I'd probably been donating stuff for his homestead out there and things just to see what he could do with all of it, and he goes to some impressive lengths with it by the end of the film.
And speaking of friendships, speaking of the friendships, I'm also again looking. I was looking. The quotes don't cover nearly enough, but there I was reminded of a great one with his buddy Ben, Slim Pickens. And it's like the part where the guy's like trying to hurry him up. Driver, it's getting dark. And he just looks around. Generally does about this time. Damnedest thing I ever saw.
You looked like you had something to add up there, Brandon. What you have in your mind there?
Oh. Well, other than listening to what's going on in my background, I think that the whole watering hole scene and the banking scene was interesting, especially as it follows up. and he gets there and he's just noticing that they're trying to dig around the area, but he secured the one area.
I love that, man. He's just laughing at him, clowning on those
Right.
dudes. It's like they've been out there digging for 13 hours, and him and the banker just laughing at him.
Yep.
And then they finally have to concede. I mean, that to me is one of the most redeeming moments in the movie, where it's like, dude, he's got you dead to rights now. I mean, you guys missed this opportunity and probably got a lesser deal out of it. He was willing to cut him in for half at the beginning. I don't know what his contract eventually was, but he was living pretty high status there towards the end. So I imagine he got the better end of that stick, and rightly so. You know,
don't they say? I feel like they said. Well, I know what they did tell his initial offer. He probably cut down from his initial offer because he could.
Oh yeah, if they did that shit to me, they'd be getting 25% max. Like, no way you're getting 50% still.
Right. I think I'd probably cut it even more. Like, make sure the stagecoach dick gets like hardly any, but I'd give Ben and his buddy like a little extra.
Oh yeah, definitely. They were bringing him whiskey and mail and all that.
Right. Yep.
And it's made explicitly clear at the end. Like, one of those stagecoach dudes even says it. Like, if I was doing half as well as Cable, I would be a rich son bitch instead of just a poor son of a bitch or whatever.
Right. Exactly.
So he did good for himself, and he doesn't believe in banks, which I don't know. I think that was said more for the benefit of those other dudes, but at the same time, those stagecoach guys were vouching for it. So.
Well, he had it set up to gaslight the hell out of them. I mean, like when they started digging that hole, they found all his copper pieces and nothing else.
Oh yeah, he was setting that up from the beginning because he knew they were coming. Yeah. And he knew they'd come back along that route. I mean, he even asks them at the beginning, like, how often does this pass by here? He knew sometime in the future they were going to come back by. And he was going to be ready for him. Now, I will say this. Throughout the entire movie, I was waiting on the other shoe to drop. I was waiting on things to just drop out from under him. And I was surprised that it wasn't until the very end, and that surprised me. Because everything else, I was extremely well surprised by the fact that things didn't just turn bad for him throughout.
Right. I think a lot of movies, that's how they would have done it. And even at the end, you know, they somehow make what would normally be a very, very tragic ending, and still is kind of sad, into a light, heartwarming kind of a scene, you know? Like, he died a goddamn legend, you know? Well loved by the community, and that whole speech that Joshua gives for his eulogy or whatever is just amazing.
He does have a good eulogy, and I like one particular line that they actually do list in the credits, where he says he charged too much. He was as stingy as they come. Yes, he might have cheated, but he was square about it. Rich or poor, he gouged them all the same.
Yes, epic. But the revenge thing is kind of the underlying plot, you know. And that sets up the whole tragicness of Cable's stubbornness. He could have left with Hildy when she left to San Francisco and probably lived a happy life into his old age. That is not how the movie ends up playing out. But he does get his revenge. I don't know. What did you guys think about? I guess it's a good point to talk about that. And then I guess the homestead in itself is almost a character. So we'll cover that before we close her out. But
I think that the revenge was handled very well, because you could tell that he really didn't necessarily want to kill them at the end. He wasn't he's not somebody who kills because he wants to. And but after he killed the one guy in defense of himself, he was ready to do it. So when the one guy calls his bluff about it, he's like, well, fine, bam. Which you could see that look on surprise on his face, like, I wasn't expecting him to do it. And, and
he gave him a lot of leeway too.
And I did like that. I did like that psychological games he played with them. Like I said, he gaslighted them to make them think he had this buried treasure or something. He let them dig this huge hole, and then he started wandering around just out of sight, where like they would have to climb out of the hole prone, vulnerable, to see where the hell he was. And he's just like playing games with them the whole time. And I was like, That was pretty fun.
Threw those snakes in there.
Oh man, that dude freaking out never fails
Yes.
to make me laugh my ass
Yeah.
off. I
I
forget
know.
those dudes' names. I always
Well, they're Bowen and Taggart. And
yeah,
Bowen,
but I always get them like confused. Bowen's the ditzy
Bowen's
one, right?
Brother Martin, and Taggart was L.Q. Jones. And from what I understand, they played similar roles in the Wild Bunch. I can't remember if I've seen that, sadly, but
Oh, you should.
I know they're both like kind of iconic actors of the time. Jones was in tons of westerns, and his last film role was actually Robert Altman's Prairie Home Companion, where he played an old cowboy, and Mask of Zorro, and he had a lot of good stuff over the years. But and then of course Martin, he had some pretty high profile roles at the time, and they made a good team. Like they were an odd pair.
Yeah, you got like the more grizzled outlaw scumbag dude, and then the other guy's like that wimpy guy that just basically talks shit from the sidelines but goes along with it, probably so he doesn't get killed himself.
Well, actually, though, it is worth noting that Martin played one of the scummiest scumbags of the time. He was the captain, if you will, in Cool Hand Luke. The what we have here is failure to communicate. I believe that was him that had that line. And then, he was in Butch Cassidy and whatever. So that was this was a different role for him a little bit. He's definitely the one that would have been driven around by that character. But Jones was so much younger here. I barely recognized him.
Well, and I think maybe you guys might agree with this, but I expected him to blow those dudes away cold. Like I just expected him to kill him because they set you up to maybe think that blows that dude away in self-defense. I really love that Cable still kept his humanity at the end. Like he didn't want him just murder him. He wanted to put them through the same shit they put him through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he was giving them I don't know about fair shot, but he was definitely giving them about the same shot that they gave him.
Yeah.
50,000 gallons of sand.
Exactly, yeah.
And
he even ends up doing that exactly with Bowen. Like he gets him stripped down to his undies, and he's like, start marching, and then this little car goes by and it kind of breaks the spell, I guess you'd say. And then Bowen just comes back on his knees saying like, I wouldn't make it, please. So he basically begs for his life, and Cable's like, okay.
I love how he doesn't really say anything. He doesn't agree or disagree. He's just they're just in sort of like, what the fuck is up with these horseless carriages, Right. And then when the other guy comes by with Hildy, the stagecoach dudes come back by. When he gives Bowen the homestead, the watering hole, like that always almost chokes me up for some reason, because it's like, man, not only did he not kill this dude, but he's inheriting him what he built out here because of them,
right?
Albeit at probably not the most opportune time, because you realize that the necessity of this watering hole is quickly going out the window. But Bowen is himself a pretty opportunistic little shit, and he comes up with basically the idea of a gas station right there.
Yeah,
right.
Well, I mean, one thing I would have liked to have seen, just to add to it, would be if Cable had started singing his own tune about them and their misadventures as they go, just like they did for him, talking about him being yellow and all that. That would have been great if he had done that. That would have been the perfect turnabout at the end.
Oh yeah, that'd have been awesome. So I guess before we just sort of break down that awesome homestead, I don't know why I like it so much, man. I like to build forts a lot as a kid, though, so maybe that's part of it. And he built a hell of a fort out there.
Yeah.
Our final scene, is basically, after he's built up, he's become an established member of the community in his own way, even though he lives out there by himself. But he's a necessity. He's the halfway point. You know, this desert that he's found the water in is typically barren. You know, it was a death sentence to be trapped out there, and it was like an arduous journey because it's basically 40 miles of pure desert with no water, which a horse and carriage that can take a while, you know, and then especially just on foot, you're screwed, you know. So,
and not just water, he tries to provide hospitality. I mean, we talked about his ingenious method of serving food, if you will, but you got to talk about the food itself. I love that little scene
the
where
desert stew.
where the family, the family's asking, they're loving it, they're absolutely loving it, and the preacher is trying to gussy it up and make it sound all fancy, and he's just picking through it. Well, we got like a little gopher and a rattlesnake and
pack rats.
Pack rats. And then all of them are like puking and running away, and the kid just sits there.
You can find him, it helps. That was my favorite part of that for some reason.
And those type of way stations were not unusual back in the Western time because they would have these. That was what they call them, was way stations. As a matter of fact, they utilized a way station in the Dark Tower series.
Indeed.
But a different type of way station in a way.
You could see Cable and the preacher being characters in that story. You could definitely see that.
Well, and they still exist in a sense. I don't know how much wide open like rural area you guys have out there on the East Coast, but over here, definitely if you're driving between, there's like ghost towns out here in like, especially in southeastern Oregon.
I've been wondering about this myself because I've been wanting to do a lot of exploring for a naturalist and whatever in southeastern and southern Virginia. You can drive for miles and see nothing but farmland and rundown buildings that you're like, is that even still open? And then every now and then you'll see a house way back from the roadside. And you sitting there going, I can't stop anywhere along here because I know there's someone nearby with a gun. And it's like,
or they might wear your face, bro. I mean,
exactly.
I mean, I know in West Virginia, I remember going from DC to Morgantown, and then from Morgantown back to Covington, which is along. So basically, you're going up from the northern end of West Virginia all the way down to the southern end. And most of that area, not Morgantown, but when you go between Morgantown and the other, it's trees, mountains, and there's trees on the mountains. And that's basically it. And
those lovely tunnels that are only wide enough for one car.
And you can go just above the tree line a little bit, and you can see just trees on trees, no buildings in sight, but you'll see that one lone gas station. And if you don't fill up at that gas station, you ain't gonna make it the rest of the way.
I also had that experience. I also had that experience my first time in Pennsylvania. We were driving through Pennsylvania, and you go long stretches on the main roads. You don't see anything. It's like, ooh. So they still exist. Yeah. But I'm sure the places you see are a little less ramshackle than this homestead. But again, given that this is a guy who's basically a bum, who's working on very little money, he did pretty good.
Well, and I know that we're probably going to get into production here for a moment, so I wanted to say something about that. Okay. Evidently, the production was plagued by poor weather. Due to Peckinpah's renewed alcohol consumption and his firing of 36 crew members, because apparently when they couldn't shoot because of the weather conditions, the cast and crew would go to the local bar and eventually they ran up a tab of like $70,000.
Yep.
So epic. I didn't know that.
This is what it said. First item on IMDb, first trivia thing was, when filming Rap, the bar bill came to $70,000, which they put a little thing here, over $435,000 in 2016 dollars.
Jesus,
And yes,
how much was the budget for this movie, man? That had to have been a sizable chunk of
Well,
it.
the
that's
film
a big part of it.
19 days over schedule, and it was $3 million over
Over budget. Yeah.
How?
And that
How do you
was
spend that much making a movie like this?
which
Well,
it
it also kept
terminated
firing
his,
people.
it terminated his tenure with Warner
Yeah.
Brothers
Yeah.
in the end of
As
that.
it should. God damn.
But it also led directly to him doing Straw Dogs, which might be a good thing.
Yeah,
And
I'll never not thank the universe for that movie.
One of the trivia things I read that I found interesting was that Peckinpah says this is his favorite movie he did, and he would actually take it with him to show to people who may never have heard of it.
Yes, that's amazing. It's my favorite one too, Sam, wherever you are. I don't know. He's dead, right? I would assume.
Well, and apparently the two films that were
He died in '84
box office hits were Deliverance and Jeremiah Johnson, and those were in development at the time before he as he was finishing Cable Hogue. So if he had stayed at Warner Brothers, he was actually being considered.
Dude, Jeremiah Johnson's like a good sort of spiritual companion to this in some ways too, if you really think about it.
Both of those are movies I have seen that I need to see again. I think I have both on VHS and haven't bothered to get them on DVD.
Didn't you say Jason Robards is dead too?
Yes, he died, I think, in 2000.
I don't suppose he was ran over by a horseless carriage, was he?
No, he died. Yeah, he died at the end of 2000. Actually, him and Peckinpah both died at the end of December.
I guess the nice thing about the soundtrack is that Richard Gillis actually wrote not only that Tomorrow is the Song I Sing for Hogue, but he also wrote two other songs for two of the other characters. Which is Hildy and Joshua. What
was that? Butterfly Mornings for Hildy,
and Wait for Me Sunrise for Joshua.
Definitely, the music is its own animal in this. I like it. You could argue that it gets repetitive, but at the same time, it's one of those movies that knows it has a good theme song and runs with it. And they fit it in at parts where it's appropriate, so it doesn't feel like they're just throwing it out every single opportunity they get. But and having little things like them actually singing the songs in the movie, I thought it was such a cool touch. And then when you really listen to it too, like the whole audio quality of the movie almost has that quality of like a folk music record or something. You know what I mean? Like it's got that 70s folk quality to like the audio quality of even just their dialogue. So when it goes like into them singing Butterfly Mornings, it's almost seamless, like it doesn't feel like it doesn't sound like a scene where the characters are singing at first until it pans up and you see that she's actually singing the song.
Yeah. And I think that kind of, I could be overstating this a bit, but I kind of feel like that was a fairly regular thing for the films of the time. I feel like they utilized on-screen singing a little more seamlessly in the 70s than they generally have since. But
you should bring it back, man. I mean, it's like
again, they made a whole production in MASH of Suicide is Painless. That whole scene was just a great scene that they incorporated right into the movie. I think it was their dentist, right? Their company dentist who was having suicidal thoughts. So that was like, they're all trying to give him a funeral to help him get over being suicidal, basically, which, was kind of a cool little thing there. But we need to cover that movie one of these days.
That main theme for the movie too, man. For some reason, I just love that song so much because it perfectly encapsulates like the vibe of the movie. When you listen to the lyrics of it, it's basically him saying like, you know what, I'm just gonna make the best of this, no matter what you do to me, and then I'll be smiling this song tomorrow, when the day is through.
Well, like you said, it is an earworm.
It definitely is. I think the only theme song I've heard for, and it's in a similar sort of vibe is the theme song for Harold and Maude. Like that's the one that I discovered recently that it, like hit me in that same way as the Cable Hogue song. Like it
still need to see that.
It's perfect for the movie. So I guess,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. We could talk a moment about the beautiful use of montages in the movie. They do a good job of that. There's some scenes that would have made it drag a lot more had they not been montaged. What's that?
We need a montage.
Birthday boy, why don't you start?
Who the what now?
Since you're the birthday boy, why don't you start?
Oh, dude. I mean, the montages, you know, I think honestly, when I saw this the first time, even right from that opening title sequence, how they do it in that kind of like retro style cuts, you know, and splices into the screen, and it's all moving and showing the credits in little boxes and stuff. And Cable's having that internal dialogue with God as he's wandering through the desert, all screwed. And it's just like I knew right then that I was watching something special with that music and everything behind it. You know, it's just it's kind of a perfect opener to the movie, and then it just goes from there. You know, you get the whole montage with him and Hildy building up the homestead further after she comes to stay with him for a bit. You get the whole montage when he's like,
that's where you have the butterfly morning whole thing.
Oh yeah, such one of the best sequences in the movie for sure. I think it ends with her in the bathtub too, and then the stagecoach shows up, and
yes,
I mean, one of the best comedic moments in the movie. I think it's just I don't know, man. I think that this is one of those movies. It was long as it was, you know, but they filled it up nicely. I think this is a contender for stuff almost like Seven Samurai, where as you're watching it. It kind of just feels like 90 minutes almost, you know, like it does. You don't really feel that extra half hour like you might with a different movie because it's just filled up so nicely, and they do a lot to move it forward with those montages when they pull them out, you know. I mean, I think we covered music fairly well. There's not a ton of it. I mean, there is a decent little score behind the character themes or whatever, and like the main theme.
It is worth noting that the main score is by Jerry Goldsmith, who has a long and storied career as a composer. So that's
indeed. Didn't we cover a movie that he scored not that long ago?
Probably.
I feel like we did, or I reviewed one. Maybe I don't know. You know, what about the location here? I mean, I think we can't understate how gorgeous the desert scenery is in the movie.
It was indeed.
And the homestead itself, I swear, is a character on its own. You know, it's all jury rigged. It's a really high quality shanty that Cable has built out there with the help and generosity of others. You know, he's got his dishes nailed down. That's so classic. I mean, we've touched on that a couple of times. He eventually turns it from just a hole in the ground into a full on like proper watering well spring type situation there.
Okay, Mo, you said it may be one you reviewed recently. He did score the first 3 Rambo movies, so that might be.
There you go. Okay, that's probably where I'm pulling that from. I haven't reviewed those yet, but I'm prepping for it, so that's definitely where I was reading his name. But I don't know. What did you guys think of the homestead? It seemed oddly cozy too, but when it was all said, I could have lived out there pretty happily. I feel.
Those nice curtains and stuff he had set up in the household. He made sure that he had a bed too when he got first in there.
He also composed scores for 5 films in the Star Trek franchise: Logan's Run, Planet of the Apes, Patton, Chinatown, Poltergeist, Gremlins, Hoosiers, Total Recall, Air Force One, L.A. Confidential, Mulan, and the Mummy. And that's just amazing.
Not to mention the most important one, Mom and Dad Save the World.
Did he do the Mummy with Brendan Fraser? Or that shitty
I believe so. Yeah.
Yep.
That shitty one with Tom Cruise is in your package too, Brandon. I don't know if you have that, but I just clicked it in there. Anyways, you know, and right at the end too, he's fully got a windmill out there. Like a little windmill bringing the water up. So he takes it from literally being a divot in the ground he made with the toe of his shoe to being an established homestead with, you know, rudimentary livestock, a rattlesnake farm for soup,
Mhm.
You know? And he's moving the water around and like basically cleaning it with those aqueducts and things like that, which I thought was really neat. You know, Bowen lucked into a hell of a deal right there, like going from almost being marched to his death through the desert to inheriting sweet ass homestead. And I just like how thrifty he was about doing it. It was all sort of built from found objects, you know, or trading the week's watering rights to the stagecoach people so that they would trade him like supplies to build it initially and all that. You know, it can't not be said that homestead is pretty awesome in terms of like desert shanties.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess this is a good point here. I mean, we basically covered the plot. You know, he builds his desert empire out of this watering hole. He eventually gets his revenge. And, you know, we think he's going to get his happy ending, but he gets ran over by a car. And if you get the chance, check out Cable's eulogy from the movie in the very least, you know, because that is a super good moment. The way they transition direct. I didn't think the first time I saw it that he's actually going to die because they're kind of joking around. But it really slams home that reality. Like, yeah, pretty much when you get ran over by a car, in those days, you're screwed, you know.
Cable got run over by an auto.
I did like how he wanted to make sure that they did the eulogy when he was alive, because one of the things that he least liked about the idea of dying is somebody talking about him when he's not there to say anything about it.
Yeah,
exactly. They basically have a live funeral for him.
So there was like a little element of Get Low mixed into this as well. It's like, you know, but yeah, I had mixed feelings about that. Like, I didn't like seeing him get killed off right at the end. I thought that was kind of like, really? It didn't, to me, tonally, it was a little bit off. But on the other hand, it wasn't too far off. Like, it was, the film had such an arch sense of humor to begin with.
Yes, that's what I was
I think if I watched it again, I would probably take the ending better.
Indeed.
The first viewing, it was kind of off, but
it hits. It's a surprise for sure, like Brandon said, because you think that he's going to get that happy ending, you know, that life that he deserves after all of this shit, and then he still trying to be a nice guy. You know, underneath all that grit and grizzle, he gets ran over by their car because he bumps. He actually kills himself because he hits the parking brake with his friggin' bag because he's like ready to
and
load
then
up.
he pushes Bowen out of the way. He would have gotten killed.
Ends up saving one of the dudes that put him in the that he just inherited the homestead to. You know, it's just such a good humanity moment for Cable. I think it shows that under all of that, he is definitely a good dude, and all he wanted I think he got the best ending he could get given the circumstances. He had all his friends around him. You know, he got that awesome eulogy where Joshua talks about, you know, by the end, basically he started with nothing, and by the end there wasn't like a critter in the desert that he didn't know, you know, and he was well loved. So I suppose this is a good moment for us to just nail down, you know, if you guys want to throw out your favorite character, favorite scene, then we can close this out here. Move on to
Actually, I'll go ahead.
Increasingly more nerdy here.
I actually do like the preacher guy for the most part. Like I say, he reminds me of the classic anime pervert.
Yes.
As close to one in reality as I've seen in American movies. Now, as far as favorite scene, I just like that whole thing with the bank, especially with the whole line with the well, I trust them less if it's
yes.
But yeah, and also before we close out, because I know we're not going to do much on outros, I would like to again thank our voting people from, let's see, Movie Collectors, Talk Movies With Us, Moe's Tavern, Animazing Collections Incorporated. You guys have helped us pick most of those. Not this one, but most of the others.
All right.
Are we going around doing favorites?
Yeah. You go ahead and do your favorite character, favorite scene there, Dave.
I would have to say that I think my favorite moment is seeing that $5 bill had that smile. I'm going to go with that one first because it's like the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other kind of a moment. You know,
Right.
it's like he's trying to stop himself from going over to seeing or even meeting Hildy. And yet his dollar bills are saying, "Yeah, go get her."
I like when he first sees her go up and with the first drawn into the room too. He's like, ugh, like he has that look on his face like of disapproval. But then once he has, maybe I might take advantage of that.
Right.
He does. Unfortunately, you know,
Yeah.
he gets the rug pulled out from under him when the damn tent revival happens.
Right. And
what about you? There? Good.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know that we mentioned her kicking a hole in the door. That was kind of fun.
I did, yeah, because that reminds.
okay.
It's like a little anime parallel there too. That I got, you know, the more I think about it, that has some anime vibes to it too, with the chucking random objects at him, like in exaggerated fashion, and then just you guys know what I'm talking about.
Now, in fairness, this did come out prior to most anime, so maybe, who knows? Maybe this was a big hit in Japan and we just don't realize it, and it was a
possible.
but
it's possible someone out there somewhere like this sort of obscure little Peckinpah gem and worked it into some stuff, you know.
So
who are we missing here on the favorite scene, favorite character? Did we get you, Jake?
Well, I'm about to launch into that. And I was just going to throw out another possible, like in terms of like influences and whatever, another possible way that, who knows, maybe it's a Maverick tie-in, like that stagecoach driver who dies and Annabelle dismissively says, well, how do we know he was nice? All he's got in his wallet is a bunch of names of whole houses. Who knows? Maybe that was the preacher after he became a stagecoach driver later in life.
I don't know. He did have that sweet friggin' like it's a subtle thing, but when you see him later at the end of the movie and he rolls up on a motorcycle with a sidecar, you know that sidecar is going to be filled with some unfortunate souls.
Yes. So basically, I'm probably going to go with Cable as my favorite character. There were several that I liked. I liked Hildy, and I liked the preacher, and I liked the banker, and I liked the Ben, the stagecoach driver. There were a lot of them I liked. It's easier to single out who I didn't like, you know, than the ones I liked. I think Cable, though, overall, he was maybe the most well-rounded. He definitely was a likable character. There are things I didn't care for, but overall, I liked him as a character. As far as favorite scenes, again, there were a lot of them I enjoyed. I think I might agree with Brandon that the banker's line about that would be the first person I would not trust. And I liked Cable's response where he basically was like, well, yeah, I agree with you. So it's like they kind of bonded on that little note. I liked that a lot. And there were other little bits here and there. I do want to mention real quick before we wrap, though, one thing that I didn't like, and I wondered about this when I was watching the movie. But again, this may be a product of the times, and we're in a more enlightened time now. But I did read that Sam Peckinpah did allow animals to actually be killed as part of the film.
They blew the shit out of that Gila monster.
Yeah, so they did kill some snakes and lizards and stuff. And being a big reptile fan, that was a not a good thing in my book. So
it
I
is
do
a
have to
bummer,
comment.
but you would be correct in that it's a. I mean, obviously, you can't do that shit now. That's just
No,
not
you
something
can't.
that they let you do. I think though that they'll still let you use real human skeletons in movies. So I don't know if that's changed, but if for real legit used to be cheaper to just buy it from like a medical supplier than it was to make a skeleton from scratch. You know, so. Like Poltergeist, that lady's getting all that corpse water in her mouth because she's swimming with freaking skeletons.
Some of the food that some of the people hunted for in westerns were actually, in fact, real live meats. So,
well, to that point, I mean, as long as they ate it, when Cable was breaking down the desert stew, it looked like he pulled a real skinned snake out of the snake.
He probably did.
Yeah, so I'm hoping someone actually ate that stuff. Unfortunately, with movies with multiple takes, lots of times food gets wasted. That's just an unfortunate reality of it. But hopefully they ate some of the snakes. I doubt they ate the Gila monster. It was pretty much hamburger. That is a bummer. I feel you on that. I think if I had to pick a favorite character, it would be Cable also. Again, though, there's so many likable characters in the movie. I mean, and really just only a couple of intentionally unlikable ones. So in terms of the cast, it's like it's easy to just sort of develop a fondness for all of them. But Cable has obviously the best moments in the movie. I mean, he's the titular character. And so it would stand to reason that my favorite scenes are definitely the whole sequence where he gives away the homestead to Bowen. Like just the way that all plays out and how adorable Bowen is, like telling everybody how many horseless carriages he's seen and stuff like that. It's great. It's just a really, he still hasn't lost that good-heartedness that made him hesitate to shoot them in the first place when they screwed him over at the beginning of the movie. Even through 3.5 years of stewing on that revenge, he didn't let it make him a mean person, and that was pretty cool. And then obviously Cable's eulogy is one of my favorite sequences of the movie. I love how on his grave marker they put his name and then it just found water where it wasn't.
Yes. And
and
that was like his frequently stated I found it where it wasn't.
Yeah, found it where it wasn't. Like he just.
So obviously he obviously never saw that instructional video on Robinson Crusoe on Mars that said that water is where you find it.
I just love it. I love his straightforwardness too. Like even a good example of that is where he shoots at the Reverend when they first meet, and then he basically tells him like, you're gonna sit here while I go in there, and he just says the lending of your horse or whatever. He doesn't even say like I'm taking your horse or the loan of your horse. That's what he just straight to the point like that. And the way he rolls up into the banker's office, that's what's fun about Cable is he might seem gruff and abrasive, but he's determined, and deep down under that, he's a really, really good dude, And so those are my favorite moments. I guess, since we're not doing outros, I'll pose this final question to you fellas. Is this a movie you would revisit, and would you recommend it to people?
Oh, yeah.
Most definitely.
Highly recommend sitting down with it if you're ever like homesick or something like that. It's one of those movies it just warms the belly a little bit, like a good bowl of porridge,
Or on TNT for guys who like movies.
Dude, I have laid on my couch right over there and watched Cable Hogue when I was like hungover as shit or wrecked with the flu, and it's like, you know what? After that first opening bit, it's like I didn't have it as bad as Cable, so I think I'm probably good for the day. If I can build a lunch, if this guy can build a homestead, I can build myself lunch and like.
All right, so we ready to move on?
Thank you guys for actually watching this and getting in here with me. This was awesome. I think that this was a fun discussion. It's definitely a movie that more people should see. So if you're listening out there, or if you're one of our fine friends that is off watching old dudes fight right now, definitely please still grab the movie at some point and watch it. You won't regret it.
They should probably do a Peckinpah collection for Criterion.
They should.
And they keep releasing Straw Dogs. Why not just go ahead and bundle it with some other stuff?
Alrighty.
Yeah.
So, ladies and
All right.
gentlemen, join us for another discussion shortly, where we go on and discuss a movie in the medieval past.
Yeah, we're going full Ronnie James Dio D&D nerd on your ass right now with a little Rutger Hauer classic.
Dudes and Dragons. No, just kidding.
Lack of dragons, but
All right.
Catch you later, folks. Thank you for listening.